There was a earnings report by Tesla a couple of days ago, and Cern Basher actually watched it, paid attention. Cern, did you have any surprises, any shocks, anything that just like leapt out at you during the earnings report before we get into your slides? Was there a magic moment, positive or negative?
Well, it was since I'm focused on humanoid bots, that's my big thing as far as Tesla goes long term. I was a little bit not discouraged, not saddened, but Elon's comments about the ramp on bots was not consistent with what he'd previously said,
That's correct.
to say the least. Now, I don't put too much weight in the super optimistic numbers from him, and I'm not putting too much weight in these lower numbers. Um, Either way, he's still talking about how the bot ramp is going to be the fastest ramp of all time for any product. If he's putting himself up against the iPhone, then the iPhone got to 200 million a year in 9 years.
200 million a year in 9 years. Okay,
Yeah, from zero.
got it, got it.
So if that's his benchmark, then fine. You can have a slow ramp in the first few years, but if you get to 200 million a year, I'm going to be happy.
So I've always been amused by his comment with regard to the fastest ramp of any product ever. I mean, he's got to be he really needs to narrow down that definition because
Yeah.
quite frankly, I ramped bicycle water bottles to 5 million in about 3 years. So
Yeah.
he's going to need
Dare,
to
dare I say that a bicycle water bottle is a little bit different than an Optimus robot, but yes.
But yeah, but he doesn't characterize it. He doesn't
Right.
say. I mean, I'm sure that there are people that have ramped something way faster than my 5 million water bottles as well. In fact, I had and bicycle water bottle cap maker, who started making the caps for me, and he went from 0 to 5 million caps in like a weekend.
I'm sure Elon knows in his mind what he's talking about. He just hasn't shared it with us yet.
Right, right, right. Okay. Anyway, okay, so yes, I agree with you. That was odd to me. Now, the one thing that I thought about that was if in fact it's going to be that slow of a ramp, I have to believe that if he believes that, and not just sandbagging, that nobody else is going to ramp faster. So therefore, even with dozens of people ramping at that speed or less, that would dramatically reduce the number of bots out there because I'm expecting other companies to ramp faster than what he just said, as well as Tesla. So if it ramps slower, that would say to me that the price would be higher for longer, or the rental, or the whatever
Hmm.
whatever methods used. So we might have higher revenues and higher profits for longer if the ramp for everybody was indeed that slow. What do you think about that?
That could well be the case. I think that's fair. The other thing I think that's maybe changed since January when he sort of made his last batch of comments on this is this whole tariff situation.
Oh yeah.
And he's probably not counting on at all anymore getting any components from China
Hmm.
or doesn't want to. Now, Japan could be a good component supplier.
Right.
They're pretty sophisticated when it comes to this stuff. So we'll see how this shakes out. But I think right now he's probably feeling a little bit cautious with respect to, the component flow in order to ramp up bot production.
Right. 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 All right.
So
That's good. So we were seeing things similarly. And it's I guess that even a million bots at $30,000 a piece, if they got all the way down to $30,000 a piece, at
oh,
maybe
it won't by then. It'll still be much higher at that
see,
point.
that's what we were just saying, right?
Yeah.
So, but if I took
Yeah.
the worst case and said, a million at 30,000, it would still be a very, very valuable product line.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think it'll be a lot more. Now, the opposite was also true with regard to energy. Oh, we're going to talk about energy later. Let's leave that for when we get to energy. All right.
Yeah. The other thing, though, that I'm not going to talk about, so we can talk about it now, is Tesla announced a new product. Did you catch that?
Well, they announced, I think, a product to be named, if you're talking about the same thing as I am, which would
I
be
don't think I am.
some other automated moving object for their own warehouses.
Well, there's that, right? There's the wording that was in the report,
Yes.
but then there was the comment on the call about how the U.S. doesn't make any drones, that
Yeah,
we're,
yeah, yeah.
we'll be a vassal state of China if we continue down this path.
So that could be the same product.
Could be.
Yes, could be the same thing because those are automated, moving, autonomous. Uh,
Right.
so that could be the same thing. I've already spent quite a lot of time on the channel talking about that because I'd love it. And it's also big enough. It's enough volume
Yeah.
to be justified.
And Elon's proximity now to, everybody in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
and folks in the Pentagon, I am sure that he's had discussions with folks in the Pentagon about this. And they probably have expressed their concerns
Yeah.
about the fact that all the drones come from China.
Right.
Right. And so I am certain that this is on his mind.
So
And who better to ramp up drone production than Tesla?
So there's Anduril and some other people that are making really, really cool drones in the United States for military.
Yeah.
But those are, I think, like what would you call it? The highly sophisticated jets and whatnot. I think Elon is talking about something more in the middle, which might be, 100-foot wingspan or something like that, or even less, maybe, did I say 100 foot? Like a 20-foot wingspan? That can drop one bomb or whatever, but you can make millions of them. And
Yeah,
I'm not sure there's anybody in the US that's making that drone.
that's right. And do I recall too, Elon sort of, on X posting about Anduril kind of, doing the cost plus, contracts with the government. And of course, Elon's not a big favor of these cost plus contracts.
Oh, they don't do
Yep.
cost plus. Anduril doesn't.
Anduril doesn't. Okay.
He makes a big deal about the fact they do not ever do them that way.
All right.
They do their own CapEx. They build it. They build what they believe that the military wants.
Okay.
Then they say, here's the price. Buy as many as you want.
So I guess I'm recalling then maybe Elon attacking or
Oh yeah,
directing those
other
comments
people.
towards Boeing.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And
Okay.
all the rest of them. Yeah.
All the rest of them. Yeah. Yeah. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there.
It is.
But yeah, we have a few things to talk about after this week's earnings call. So let's start off where we should always start, and that's with the Cybertruck. Now, Randy, this is how I drive my truck. The wheels hardly ever touch the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really fun way to drive it. You don't have much tire wear if you drive it this way. It's really, really light on the tires. It's great. And brakes, frankly, too, because brakes don't do much good when you're off the ground.
It's true. It's true.
Right. But Cybertruck looks pretty good in flight. And maybe this is the drone prototype right here.
Could be. Could be. And who are the flags?
I don't know. Yeah.
Who flag are you flying there?
I don't know whose flags those are. Yeah, I don't recall.
Now that orange looks okay in the desert, but man, that would be an ugly car in the city.
Looks great in Florida. Looks like a rolling orange grove.
Okay, you
Yep.
guys know you were second.
That keeps coming up, doesn't it? Yes. Yeah, California was first. I get it. Florida second. Here may be the first new version of the Cybertruck
Oh, okay.
without the tonneau covers.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So they may be starting to produce those now.
Right.
And then here's the usual disclaimer.
Uh-huh.
Start with this. We just had Easter weekend, and the child saying to the bear dressed up in a bunny costume, "You're not what I was expecting."
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, that's sort of how we all feel right now in the markets, don't we? All right. Just a couple things before we get to Tesla earnings matters. Matt James posted this. He says, completely underrated feature, being able to look at the live state of your vehicle's electrical system and identify any given connector. Cybertruck is amazing. And so he was showing on a screen here, you can move his thumb around the screen and look at the wiring system in the truck. It's pretty amazing.
Wow. That's crazy.
And of course, the Cybertruck account responds to that and says, anatomy lesson. The Cybertruck account, by the way, for my money, is one of the more humorous Tesla accounts.
I noticed that. Yeah.
The Optimus one can be pretty good too, but Cybertruck is really, really good.
The screen also now has a new way to show the camera. Did you see that as well? The 8 cameras now you can have them show up
Mm,
along the bottom and
yeah,
then pop on each one and have it blow up for the main show. So that was
yeah.
pretty.
Now, of course, this is in service mode here. You can tell that with the
Oh,
red line around the outside, and I think it even says service mode here on the side.
I see. Okay.
Okay, so it's not something you can just pull up
Right,
as
right.
you're driving along, but that's pretty neat.
Yep.
And I thought this was good. I'm finally experiencing range anxiety with my Dyson vacuum as I do major spring cleaning. It's already needing recharging 3 times. Gonna go back to a gas-powered vacuum soon, I guess.
A gas-powered vacuum.
This is James Dalma's significant other.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was a good comment on
Very
range
good. Very
anxiety.
good. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's get into some Tesla earnings
Sure.
news. So here are the components of revenue. Red is the auto business.
Okay.
The light blue there is regulatory credits, green's energy, and services and other is the yellow or the gold color.
Okay.
And you can see here the magnitude of the drop in the auto business. Everything that plus everything else is about where the auto business was in the prior quarter, in the fourth quarter of 2024. So it was a significant drop off in Q1.
Right.
Again, we know why. It was the Model
Sure.
Y changeover, global changeover. If you don't make the vehicles, you can't sell them.
Right.
So we should expect a pretty good uptick in Q2.
Hmm.
But just from a percentage of revenue, in this quarter, it was the first time that autos was less than 70%
Hmm.
of total company revenue.
Okay. Hmm.
Now, I don't expect it to stay here. This is a highly temporary situation, but just kind of interesting. It's a sign of things to come as we get greater growth in energy, and then of course robotaxi, and then eventually humanoid bots,
Right. Right. And then eventually drones.
eventually drones, another whole nother category to add on here. Yeah. And then more importantly than revenue is profit. This is business line gross profit.
Hmm.
And so, if you are a bear on the stock, you could certainly say, well, gross profit's gone nowhere for many, many, many quarters now.
Right.
You have to go back to Q2 of 2021 in order for the gross profit we had this last quarter to be higher
Hmm. Hmm.
than where the company spends. So it's been a while.
And then in the fourth quarter of 2021, the stock in November of 2021, the stock was at 310. So we're okay.
Yeah, I mean that was a different time back then for
I
sure, but
know.
yes.
I'm just.
Yeah. Yeah. But the one thing you note here is look at energy in green.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk more about this later, but it really wasn't here at all in terms of gross profit. Actually, it was losing money back here in
Right.
21, 22.
Right.
And then the second quarter of 22 it started to make some money. And since then, the green bars have gotten larger and larger and larger.
Hmm.
Okay. So that business is really starting to take off. And then as a percentage of total gross profit, autos this last quarter was about 60%.
Hmm.
I'm assuming regulatory credits are basically 100% margin, so that's a pretty good chunk.
Right.
And then energy and services and other. By the way, the services and other business, I think by the end of this year, will be profitable over its entire lifetime.
Oh, okay.
So I'm tracking that, but we're a couple $100 million away now from being, I think it was a couple hundred, maybe 300 million from being away from reaching positive profits, cumulative profits.
Right. And
So it'll,
somebody on X noted, I think earlier today, that solar is probably still a drag. We
I'm
don't
sure it
know,
is.
we don't know that for sure, but it's probably still a drag. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're no longer really reporting any
Right.
information, any details on that. So yeah, it can't be helping at this point. Or if it is, it's so small, it's not
Right.
really significant. And then here's the business line gross margins. So if there was one sort of, shining thing in the quarter was that energy's gross margins reached the second highest level ever,
Mm,
28.8%,
mm,
just shy of a couple of quarters ago when it was over 30. The auto business gross margins continue to slide down, and services and other, it's kind of in that range where they want them, say 5 to 10%.
right.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I track affordability of a Tesla. So this is the average change in the average selling price.
Hmm.
Now, this is a combination of price changes plus also a combination of a mix shift in the vehicles, right? So if they're selling more lower cost vehicles, then it looks like the average selling price is going down.
Hmm.
And I guess functionally it is, but there's a couple of things at play here in terms of calculating this number. But this last quarter, we actually had a slight increase in the average selling price,
Hmm.
almost $400. Now, again, not selling a whole bunch of lower cost Model Ys might hurt this number,
Right.
right? And you can see that, for many, many quarters in a row, we had declining prices. And
Right.
so this last quarter was changed there. Um, and then here's the cost to Tesla to make an EV. Also is on a long-term downtrend, and this last quarter went up by a pretty significant amount, about $924 a car.
Hmm.
Okay. Again, not making the number one selling vehicle in the world
Right.
for a period of weeks hurts this. So it's a very temporary thing. But overall, the profitability of a Tesla, again, this is average gross profit per vehicle delivered,
Mm.
taking out the regulatory credits and leases. We're at about $4,500 a vehicle, which is a low since I've been tracking this since the third quarter of 2018.
Hmm.
Now, of course, in the past, it was lower than this. If we go back earlier than 2018,
Sure.
you know, it was lower for a while. But selling vehicles is a tough business for anybody. All right, it's a tough business. So it's a good thing that Tesla is rapidly trying to transition its business model. And of course, these transitions are never perfectly smooth, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, if we were, I talked about this a little bit a few days ago. If there was no such thing as autonomous cars, on the horizon, I'm confident that the business plan would be completely different
Yeah.
in terms of the automobiles that they're producing. Everything right now is aiming towards the robotaxi, and that is impacting the cash capex that's being spent. It's impacting the designs of the new cars. I mean, the way that employee time is being spent in terms of different things. So uh, even if tomorrow, for some reason, there was a ban on autonomous cars and it was never going to happen, I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't be that hard to switch the the goal sets in the company and begin to put more emphasis on unit sales and profit margins and profit overall profit. Um,
Most
so
definitely. And we know from Walter Isaacson's book, there's been some internal debate about,
right,
cybercab and making, lower cost vehicle and whether that even made sense and doing some of that work behind Elon's back and so on, progressing things, right? So yeah, it's been tough, I think, to navigate this rapidly changing environment.
hmm, hmm,
Yeah. So we had the earnings report, we had the earnings call, and then the next day, the main Tesla account published this. And so I'm guessing that a lot of people may have missed this.
hmm,
So let's just run through it together and just make sure
right,
we hit these points. So again, they changed over the production lines for the world's best-selling vehicle across 4 factories on 3 continents simultaneously. And they're saying that's industry first. They're not aware of any other automaker that's ever done that.
right,
It's also outpacing all past ramps.
hmm,
And the Model 3 Y and Cybertruck now drive autonomously from production line to outbound lots in Fremont and Giga, Texas. The last time I watched Joe Techmeyer's video about this, the Cybertruck was still being driven by humans. And so this is a fairly recent development.
right,
That's great. Giga Texas produced its 400,000th vehicle. We talked about that last week. And they launched the long-range Cybertruck, 63,000 after incentives.
Mhm.
Giga Nevada achieved record battery pack production. No numbers here, but
Right.
record is
Yeah.
good,
No numbers.
right? And Model 3 and Y deliveries in the US are now made with 100% US built battery packs.
Mhm.
So that's great.
Right.
And then they say both semi and cybercab lines remain on track for volume production next year. So that's good news.
Yep. Yep.
In Asia, we've got the launch of the new Model Y resulted in record orders for a single day in the region. And they say, AKA the world's most competitive EV market. And then they launched FSD supervised in China. And we're getting some great videos from the Chinese putting FSD to the test. They should have done this years ago because that's gold. Yeah. Giga Berlin now has built its 500,000th Model Y. And they're going to begin deliveries of Model 3, Y, and Cybertruck later this year in Saudi Arabia.
Oh yeah.
So that's great. Um, and then FSD supervised launch in Europe still planned for this year, pending regulatory approval. And we're hearing some words, some hope that that may come sooner rather than later, but
Hmm.
they're being cautious here.
Okay.
And then, vision only plus end-to-end neural networks trained on billions of examples of real-world data, still the winner for diverse geographies and use cases, as validated by the launch of FSD supervised in China, achieved without access to country-specific training data. So that's pretty amazing. It shows how generalizable the FSD approach is. Um, yes, Robotaxi is still on track for June in Austin.
Right.
Okay. And then same for initial builds of Optimus on Gen 1 line in 2025. And then lastly, this is the last page of this. Spring update rolled out to the fleet. A bunch of changes there. They launched an IRA compliant 4680 cell, which makes the Cybertruck eligible for the tax credit.
Hmm.
So that's great news. And then the lithium and the cathode production plants remain on track for start of production this year. And on the conference call, Elon was sort of joking that he wishes they could get rid of the anode because they really don't want to have to build an anode production plant. We'll see if they can achieve that one day.
Yeah. So I had a conversation, well, a text conversation or a DM conversation back and forth with Jordan about that, and he says, yeah, it is possible. He says the problem, as always, would be the expansion and contraction, of the interior chemistry, and that's what the anode is there to do,
Hmm.
is to be able to absorb that expansion and contraction, and otherwise it breaks down and you got a problem.
Yeah, no, I'm sure long term we'll come up with all kinds of different solutions there. And then Mega Factory Shanghai produced greater than 100 megapacks. Clearly, they just started production there, but it's a fast start. And then talk about energy storage deployments continuing to grow on a trailing 12-month basis, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. They expect volatility, but they anticipate expanding capacity for Megapack and Powerwall to drive continued growth. We know about the Megapack expansion in Texas with the facility that's close to Houston. I'm not sure about Powerwall, but that's good news too.
Mhm.
And then they achieved record Powerwall deployments for the fourth quarter, crossing 1 GWh for the first time. I believe their capacity for Powerwall, if I'm not mistaken, is something like 10 GWh.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
that's what we've talked about. We've talked about like something on the order of even up to 3 per quarter. And so only being at 1 for the quarter would be only a third of what we
yeah,
understood it to be. But maybe that capacity is meaning the buildings can do it, but maybe they said they were or they were constrained by production, that they have the orders. So I don't know.
Hmm.
That would be interesting
So
further.
they talk about expanding capacity here in the previous line. So
Yeah,
that would indicate that they're getting maxed out. So maybe our understanding of 10 GWh for Powerwall is too high.
maybe.
And then finally, they delivered 1.4 terawatt hours to Tesla and non-Tesla customers across 42 million charging sessions. So that's great on the charging side. All right. Jan of the EV Universe put this together. He compared the table that Tesla puts in their earnings deck that shows the current installed annual vehicle capacity.
Mhm.
So the one on the top is the end of the year Q4 one, and the one on the bottom is the most recent one. And so the numbers themselves haven't changed, but Cybercab's gone from being in development to now construction. Semi's gone from pilot production to construction. And Roadster, the poor long-suffering Roadster, you know, order holders, it's gone from in development to design development. They should say redesign. I think this thing's been designed and redesigned several times. But man, when this vehicle comes out, it's going to be amazing,
That's right.
whenever that is.
He actually said it was going to come out in 2025. So we know that sometimes he's early.
Yeah. So this kind of inspired me to go back and look at the previous reports, and I put together this chart.
Okay.
And so I took all the numbers from the table, and where it says greater than, I just put the number that it says greater than. I don't try to assume what it actually was. And so current stated capacity right now is 2.35 million. And that's been the case now for the last 7 quarters. That hasn't been updated enough for 7 quarters. And previously you can see the jumps that were made. There was a big one here. And when this is, I believe, the Shanghai factory. Um, prior to that, the factory utilization percentage started to rise, and it essentially got to 100. And so clearly the capacity of the factory was higher than what they were actually showing.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden they made a big jump.
Right.
So we have to take these numbers with a bit of a grain of salt. They're pretty rough estimates. But that said, over the last 7 quarters, you can see that the factory utilization for Tesla was kind of, trending down, although maybe you would say it was flat if we don't exclude this quarter, which is an aberration.
Hmm.
But ideally, I think you would probably want to run your factories higher than a, 70%
Yeah.
capacity, right? Something above 80, I would imagine, would be desirable. You don't want to go too high. The goal is not to get to 100. You want to build a little bit of slack in the system.
Yeah. Well, I think that you could give a break to Austin in that it is such a huge building, and I don't think they intended to build it out for capacity, necessarily that fast, even if they're calling that capacity. But maybe they did. Maybe they thought the Model Ys would sell faster. I think the one that's really disappointing is Berlin.
Hmm. Yeah. Now, they did say in the earnings deck that they're talking about their current expected maximum capacity is of close to 3 million vehicles.
Right.
Okay, so if I take that number and put it here in green, now we're at capacity utilization of about 60%.
Hmm.
So this is actually about 60% growth to get from here up to their capacity. So they've
Right.
got a lot of headroom now in terms of producing vehicles with the existing factory footprint that they have.
And again, I want to try to maybe see that just a little differently. The factory footprint maybe still has capacity left, but the lines don't. So there may be, this space in Shanghai or this space in Berlin where the space is there, but there's not actually any CapEx that's been spent on the lines yet.
Yeah.
So we might have even more capacity than 3 million within those buildings. But we need to get to 3 million. We've got some additional lines that need to be built.
Yeah. Let's just read this. It says plans for new vehicles, including the more affordable models, remain on track for start of production in the first half of 2025. These vehicles will utilize aspects of the next generation platform, as well as aspects of our current platforms, and will be produced on the same manufacturing lines as our current vehicle lineup. It's a little confusing, isn't it? Using the same lines, except you're using aspects of the next generation platform. So it's kind of intriguing as to what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly the cyber cabs are going to be on their own lines. Those are new lines because they're unboxed.
Yeah.
And then if there's any vehicles beyond that that are unboxed, those are not yet, there's no lines for those yet. Moreover, there's I think others have speculated that there's room to add additional three Y lines in Austin. And then I think that some people speculate that in Berlin, they'll be making cybercabs there and that there's room for an additional line for 3Y there as well. So that's
Yeah,
what I'm talking about in terms of lines versus the building's footprint.
right. No, I get that. Um, and again, they said this approach will result in achieving less cost reduction than previously expected,
Mhm, mhm.
but enables us to prudently grow our vehicle volumes in a more of a CapEx efficient manner during uncertain times.
Right. So
So
$35,000 car might be off the table.
maybe, I mean, it just says that they don't need to spend as much CapEx,
Right.
but yeah, they'll find it harder to offer this lower cost vehicle. Yeah, I guess that's what it's saying.
Mhm.
Yeah, right. But it's allowing us to fully utilize our current expected maximum capacity of close to 3 million vehicles, enabling more than 60% growth over 2024 production before investing in new manufacturing lines.
Right.
Not factories, but lines.
Right.
Yeah. Um, so it's interesting because their CapEx guidance for the year was still 10 billion.
Well, 10 bill, wasn't that up though? I thought it was eight previously.
I thought it was the same as what they had previously told us.
Hmm.
But in the first quarter, they only spent like 1.5 billion.
Right.
So they've got some catching up to do. And that was one of the reasons actually that cash flow was so good is that they throttled back CapEx.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but they're saying here that they won't need to put as much CapEx into the manufacturing lines, but they still intend to spend as much CapEx as they originally told us they would.
Well, I think that's because of the new building to the south of the south end
Yeah,
of Giga Texas, where they're obviously going to be putting in a bunch of chips, a whole bunch of them.
that's right. And I did an analysis actually this morning, and I guess we'll talk about it here in our next show, um, um, on the components of the spending of Tesla's property, plant, and equipment.
Okay. Okay.
And it's kind of interesting how that's changed just in the last 5 quarters. Um, so we'll leave it at this chart or this cartoon, I should say. Sorry, not a chart, cartoon. We've got three bears. Two of them look really happy, while the other one is playing a game of piñata with our 401ks. So, as much as we don't enjoy bear markets, at least these bears get to enjoy some playtime. Yeah, that's my strange sense of humor, Randy. Sorry.
There you go. Your strange sense of humor. Well, it is strange times, and I'm still encouraged. I think the market was up again this morning, wasn't it?
Yeah, and actually, we had some favorable developments here, or an inkling that the Trump administration might be looking for a national policy on approving autonomous vehicles.
Oh, I
That was
didn't.
breaking news this
Wow.
morning. Yeah,
Okay. Very good. Very good.
yeah,
And I'm noticing that the S&P has, this is now 12:14 in California around noon. We're at S&P 5462. And so the way that I calculated the 10% off the all-time high, we only need to get to like 5522 or something like that to be back to the a 10% correction. Other people, I think, have put that at 5480. So I'm not sure it really, it's really critical, but we're very, very close to being back to just a correction as opposed to something more than a correction for what that's worth.
5 years from now, we won't remember any of those numbers because it won't matter. But yes, here and now, it's interesting.
Yep. All right. So we've heard a lot of news today also about whether Trump is or is not talking to the Chinese, or whether the administration has or has not been speaking to the Chinese. The last thing I heard was maybe he talked to somebody that Trump himself spoke to somebody this morning. Is that what you heard as well?
I haven't received any updates on that, but I can say that they better be talking to the Chinese. That's a pretty important negotiation, I think, to be making progress on if possible. But at the same time, I guess, because you involved every country in the world in negotiations all at once, I'm sure that they're pretty busy right now. I can imagine the switchboard in the White House from all the different leaders trying to reach out.
It is a remarkable, talk about getting all four of your factories switched over at once. How about getting the entire world for the first time in 50 years to completely restructure the way that trade happens with the largest economy in the world? This is a remarkable point in history to be observing.
They've given themselves a very challenging task. I hope that they can execute on that well. Many people are depending on it. Let's say that.
That's true. So Brian Wong says that he has now been proven right, that the bad news is all in on the economy in general. He said from the April 2nd to the 22nd would be the worst part of the news, and that everything from here would be positive as we get these different. And that he made that projection back in before April 2nd. And that from now on, as the various countries make agreements, that all we will do is move up, and so that by May or early June we could be back to all-time highs. What do you think?
I think that is possible. Anything's possible. But yes, I think the key point there is that the market does the best it can in trying to price in the worst, right? Like we saw this with Tesla's results.
Mhm.
The market didn't really care what the bottom line number was. It was all about the outlook, and it always is about the outlook, right? Unless there's some incredible surprise in the numbers that people weren't expecting.
Mhm.
But with Tesla, because you get the production and delivery report a few weeks ahead of time, you pretty much know what's coming with respect to earnings,
Right,
right?
right.
There might be a few tiny little surprises, but they're not going to be huge. Um, and so that's the process I think that people are trying to go through for the entire stock market.
Mhm. Mhm.
And in a state of uncertainty, people are going to price in the worst, right? It's like shoot first and ask questions later kind of approach. That's how the manic stock market works.
For the Manning stuff.
Right. And then of course you always have the media either nowcasting or forecasting based on what's in the past.
Yes.
Right. For example, most of the media reports about Tesla's earnings were on the historical numbers, and they really didn't talk a whole lot about the future.
Right. Right.
Right. And so that's just something to keep aware of when you're looking at investments in the markets, and the media really is telling you basically what's already happened.
Yeah,
Right. It doesn't.
you'll have some of the pundits who will say, "Oh, we're more interested in the guidance than we are in the actual numbers." But then when they actually report, the guidance is on the sixth paragraph.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes the guidance with these companies is not forthcoming, and so then you're left with this massive uncertainty.
Right.
Right. And Tesla really hasn't given much in the way of guidance this year, and I don't blame them because it's
Right.
a pretty uncertain year.
Right.
Right. It highly depends on how this tariff negotiation goes.
Heavily that, and also in terms of how that impacts the overall economy. I was encouraged this morning to see that I'm sorry, the durable goods was actually way up compared to expectations, and that the durable goods transportation aspect was up the most. Now, some people are saying that that's some automotive sales that are being pulled forward in anticipation of tariffs raising the prices of vehicles, and that could end up with us having a crash, a big crash in the auto market later, when the tariffs are all figured out, where people will have already bought the cars, or as some people put it, the inventory will have moved from the dealer lot to the garage,
Right.
each of our garages. And then there won't be any more space in the garage for another vehicle. So I've seen this boom bust thing. I've been talking about this channel for months and months and months, maybe even the whole time I've been on here, because I've experienced it so many times in the bicycle industry. And so good news in terms of durables right now. Whether that will turn into bad news later, we'll have to see.
There's also an interesting thing that will happen with Tesla as they transition from selling vehicles to selling vehicles plus putting vehicles in a fleet, robotaxi fleet.
Right,
So if in any given quarter the business of selling vehicles to consumers is weak, then you just allocate more into the robotaxi fleet,
right.
right? So you've got a natural buyer that can absorb some of the changes in the demand for vehicles. That should make Tesla's production planning a lot easier, right? You basically run the factories flat out, or the level that you want to run them at, and sell the vehicles that that you can sell to consumers, and then just absorb the rest yourself.
Right, right. Well, and
Uh,
then but the optimist in me is saying that once the full self-driving is truly full self-driving, and you can go to sleep in the back seat, it's hard for me to figure out how they're not going to sell every vehicle they can possibly make.
right.
It's just,
It's also going to be the case that even for people that are, not buying robotaxis, not using robotaxi, that just want a personally owned vehicle,
right.
there's going to be even higher demand than
Yeah.
for FSD,
Yes.
right? On that level too. So it should pull forward all kinds of sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that the word of mouth isn't going to just be off the charts once I can sit in the back seat with my friend and have the car drive me around with my next door neighbor, and he's going to be going, "I want one of those."
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
There's there's
That's
going
my
to be
prediction.
a really interesting thing that happens though, because with the robotaxi rollout in Austin, once the human drivers are taken out of the vehicle, and I'm assuming that initially there might be, human drivers there or human supervisors there, right? You don't really need them, but they're putting people in the car just for extra security, just in case something happens. Once you get to the point where you're comfortable pulling those folks out,
Mhm.
there's going to be a real focus on all the mistakes that the cars make. Right. I mean, imagine if you could observe all the Uber drivers in a day and all the mistakes they make.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's the kind of scrutiny we're going to have
Oh,
on
sure.
autonomous vehicles,
Oh, sure.
right? And there's going to be potentially some crazy examples of things that happen
Mhm. Mhm.
that'll just get blown out of proportion in the media. Whereas when you have a human driver and the crazy thing happens, no one ever hears about it.
Right.
So that's going to be an interesting time about how Tesla sort of navigates that scrutiny. And then, of course, the other thing that we've always said is that when they roll out Robotaxi in Austin on that day one, that's as bad as it's ever going to be.
Right.
It's only going to improve and probably quite quickly.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting. I know people are very excited about this rollout, and I am too, but I'm also sort of aware that there's going to be a lot of people looking for the problems.
The other thing that somebody brought up this morning, which I can't believe I hadn't already thought of this, is that every single person that gets into one of those robo taxis in Austin, when there is no driver, they just get in and it takes them where they're going to go. Unlike Waymo, when you get into that car, that is a car that you can potentially purchase. So that becomes an advertisement.
Yeah.
And so if they get their 10 rides a day or 20 rides a day, those 10 or 20 people, each one of those has just been shown what this car can do, and is now like, how do I get one of these for me?
You just tell the car to drive home and park in your in your garage.
They could do that.
Yeah.
You want to buy this car right now? Just put your card in. Seriously.
Now, to your earlier question about, surprises or, things I was not so happy about with
Oh
the
yeah,
earnings
yeah,
call,
yeah.
there was this whole thing about the language change to company update. And I was hoping that we would hear about Grok in the vehicle.
Oh yes, me too.
Right? We know it's coming. It's just
Sure.
it's just when.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that that could have been an interesting opportunity. Now, Elon's always said this is an earnings call. We don't do product announcements and all that on earnings calls. Fine, I get that. Um, So that's coming, and it's probably, hopefully, coming between now and
In June. Yeah.
June. I
Yeah.
guess it doesn't have to. If you have the app, then I guess you don't need to talk to the car,
I
but
suppose.
why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Seems like it would happen, but Well, and the other thing which was related to that, which was just the whole idea of when is unsupervised going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that was news that
Yes.
he believes unsupervised will be later this year, at least region by region.
Yeah, and if today's news is true about the federal government kind of paving the way for autonomous vehicles to be approved in all 50 states basically at once
Right.
after meeting certain standards, that's also interesting.
Indeed. Yeah.
The video I watched was talking about how if it's a foreign-made car, there's an exemption process to get approval.
Mm.
But US-made cars had a different set of rules and criteria, so they're basically allowing US-made cars to go through the foreign-made exemption process.
Hmm.
And then they're also streamlining the accident reporting methodology that they have. Right. The Department of Transportation wants to keep track of accidents, and apparently for AVs, that the process that was set up was pretty crazy. So they're taking some steps behind the scenes, I think, to kind of streamline the regulatory, framework around it.
Uh-huh.
How quickly they move on that will be interesting, but certainly there's an effort there, I think, to change the way that vehicles are approved, hopefully nationwide,
Right.
and don't just leave it up to each state.
Yes. Yes. That would be
Because
good.
there'll be some states that'll drag their feet for
Yes.
years,
Yes. 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 Possibly. Possibly.
possibly.
If it's good enough, they won't. And I have a feeling, I know you've been driving it longer and more miles than I have by a lot. I mean, the car is as close to perfect as I can imagine it. I mean, it's just the only thing my car doesn't do right now is pull in my driveway. I'm in a very weird, in a townhouse where the other people in the other, it's a two-person or two-unit townhouse, and the other townhouse is on a different street.
Yeah.
So we're on a corner, my face is on one street, their face is on a different street. And that throws off every single Uber driver and everybody else in terms of trying to find this house. So that might be an odd situation in that case. But other than that, the car, every time I've been in it, is like perfect.
Yeah. Again, I've had a great experience with FSD in the Cybertruck. And I understand that the version that I have now isn't probably as good as the one that they're going to be using in Austin, right?
Right.
That's going to be the next level. But even the version that I'm on, as amazing as it is, there have been a couple of times where if I didn't take action, that would have been bad.
Mm. Mhm.
So I think FSD is great. I think supervised FSD is amazing. I think it's made me the safest driver I could possibly be, right? And the question is, and of course, we have to rely on Tesla for this. They're telling us basically that the next version is there,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's only going to get better again in another 6 months or whatever the time frame is. And in our next show, we're going to talk about the amount of money that Tesla has been investing in its AI infrastructure
Yeah. I think that's
uh,
super interesting.
relative to its total capex, and it's quite fascinating. And so that's clearly the focus of the company, and it will be for some time to come. And of course, from 𝐑𝐚𝐬𝐼's videos, we're seeing Cortex 2 being built out at Giga Texas.
Right. Right.
All right, a whole another supercomputer right there on the site.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Well, let's get on to recording number 2. We will probably put the second half of this program up on Friday night. That's my best guess, but it might end up being Saturday morning based on breaking news. So as always, Cern Basher, thank you for being on. And to all of you out there, it's been great talking to you.
thanks, Randy.